Hi guys, Peter Bowman. So how can anyone make $1 million in real estate? That might seem crazy. It did seem crazy to me at first, but I really do mean anyone. So you don't need to have a high income for this. You could be someone straight out of college, straight out of university, and in your first career with a start out wage. This does not need a great level of wealth. This does not need a high level of income to achieve it. In fact, the sooner you start, instead of waiting to get that high income, the better, because then you will have let time and compounding work its magic. The earlier you start this, the better. Don't get caught up on how big the gains are in year 1, year 2, because I tell you it's in year 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 where the returns get really, really exciting once you've allowed things to compound. Important thing is getting started as soon as you can. Take one step today towards making yourself financially free. So for the purposes of this model, we're going to assume you have a deposit. Now, I've used a number of $50,000, which to some people in some parts of the world, that will seem insane. And your next question will be, well, where am I going to get $50,000? I will do other videos on how to get that $50,000, but you probably don't even need $50,000. I use that because where I live in Brisbane, Australia, the average property price these days is $800,000 plus. Now, wages and everything are somewhat relative as well. But on the other hand, I just sold a property in Florida for $190,000 where they would have only needed $19,000 to buy that property. So it's all relative. So whatever area of the world you live in, use the numbers that are appropriate for you. So if we work on the assumption that you have a deposit, in this case, I'm using $50,000. Typically, and that's fairly consistent all around the world, your bank will loan you 90% to buy a piece of real estate. So if you have a $50,000 deposit, you can buy a $500,000 property. Now, the other thing we're going to assume is that the real estate market in general is going up 5% each year. Now, of course, the real estate market does not go up the same every single year. However, long-term average is actually considerably higher than that. You've probably heard people say that real estate on average doubles every 10 years. Well, if we're only working on 5% increase in values each year, that's actually doubling every 16 years. So you can see we're working a lot slower in this model than what the actual average is. So the results we're about to go through are actually conservative to what is possible in real life. Now, to sustain any long-term growing property portfolio, you need to have one of two things. You either need to have increasing income to be able to service the debt if your properties are not positive cash flow, or you need to have positive cash flow properties. And what that means is the properties have enough income to pay for all of their costs, including their debt. Now, it could be either of those. Different people do it different ways. Personally, I prefer to have a portfolio that sustains itself, so it doesn't need me to be in a job. Now, if you don't know how to create positive cash flow properties, that's fine. I'll be doing other videos and showing you that. But for the purposes of this exercise and this model, we're going to assume that all the properties you purchase are positive cash flow, because it is possible, and I will show you how. What I'm about to take you through is for people that are just getting started and are looking for a way to do this with relatively low effort. I'm actually going to show you at the end how you can supercharge these results if you're willing to put in some extra time and effort. So in year 1, we're going to use $50,000 and we're going to borrow $450,000 from the bank and buy a $500,000 property. After 12 months, it will have gone up 5% in value. It is now worth $525,000. Now, there are some really important lessons to get here just at this point. Number 1 is you've done nothing and your property has gone up $525,000. Are you paying tax on that $25,000 profit? No, you are not. That is tax-free wealth gain. When people say the wealthy don't pay much tax, this is an example of how. Their net worth increases because they own assets like real estate, and you don't pay tax on equity gain. You only pay tax when you sell a property and have to declare a tax profit. Now, sometimes there are ways around that as well. In Australia, the ATO is pretty strict. In America, you've got the 1031 tax exchange. So there are different ways in different parts of the world and what you can do when you sell property. I'm going to assume that none of this property is getting sold, at least at this stage. So we're going to keep that. We've now made $25,000. Not much we can do with that at this point. So we're not going to buy a property in the second year. We're going to wait until that property is appreciated a bit more, because again, we're playing this conservatively. Now, by year 4, with 5% growth each year, your property is now worth $578,000. Congratulations. Your net worth has gone up $78,000. Now, if you're paying attention to cash on cash return, you've already more than doubled your cash because you only put $50,000 in. So if you can double your money every 4 years, you're going to be wealthy very quickly. So if that's had an aha moment for you, if that set a light bulb off, hit like, because when I saw that for me, that opened up a lot of doors. So now that we have $78,000 in equity, we're going to go back to the bank and we're going to refinance our loan. We're going to access some of that additional equity we've got because the bank is still willing to lend us 90% on the value of the property. So we're going to borrow another $60,000 and we're going to go buy another property for $600,000. We now have two properties going up in value at 5% per year. So now that we own those two properties, after only 12 months, we've made another $58,000 tax-free. But like I said, we're going to play it conservative. We're not going to buy another property that year. We're going to wait for the following year. Now you might say, oh no, I would buy one straight away. Great. Again, great way to supercharge your results. But look, life does happen, and as much as we may want to buy a property every single year, it just may not happen every single year. So we're going to assume you wait another year. That following year, your net worth goes up another $61,000. So you've now made $119,000 over those 2 years. But we're not going to use it all. We're only going to use $70,000 and we're going to go buy another property worth $700,000. Why don't we use it all? It's not much fun living on the red line and living at your max debt, trust me. Now that we have 3 properties going up at 5% per year, in that following year, you will make $100,000 in tax-free wealth. After only 7 years of playing it pretty conservative, you are making $100,000 tax-free. So we're going to celebrate by buying another property for $800,000. We're going to use $80,000 of that $100,000 and we're going to buy that property. Now, I'm not going to go through every single year blow by blow, but you can see how this is starting to escalate. Already after year 7, we're already making $100,000 tax-free per year. Well, spoiler alert, it gets better. If you continue this pattern, by year 10, you're making $267,000 tax-free per year in equity gain. And just to show you how things really snowball once you actually allow the momentum to get going, at year 15, you're making $1.25 million every year tax-free with equity gain. Okay, now definitely some of you at this point are screaming, I can't live off equity. And look, I'd agree with you. Look, yes, you can borrow it. You could stop buying properties and you could just now keep borrowing against that. And look, that would be a way to do it, not one I'd recommend. And at the end of the day, why would you want to break this cycle? But if you really, really wanted to, let's say at year 10, you said, look, that's it. It's a 10-year goal. I want out and I want to be debt-free at year 10. Well, you could sell down all of those properties and have $1.25 million cash in your hand after tax. I'll show you how that would be done. So by year 10, following the recipe we've just gone through, you would now have 7 properties and that property portfolio would be worth $7.1 million. Let's stop for a second to appreciate that. You started with $50,000. After 10 years, you now have a property portfolio worth $7.1 million. Now at this stage, you definitely have a fair amount of debt too. You've got $5.58 million worth of debt. If you were to sell the entire portfolio and work on pretty standard tax rates around the world of about 25%, there's definitely ways to do it better than that, but if we work on 25%, you're going to pay about $250,000 in tax and you're going to have $1.25 million cash sitting in your hand after that. Happy days, well done, congratulations. Again, I don't know why you would want to do that, because especially if you're making now $267,000 per year in tax-free wealth, why on earth would you want to sell that golden goose? But you certainly may choose to sell down a couple of the properties that you bought at the beginning just to lower your debt and sleep a little bit better at night. There's many options and you can cut that many different ways as much as you may like. But the point is, after 10 years in real estate and playing it conservatively, but just being diligent with not spending that money, not spending that equity gain on holidays, on boats, on caravans, on all the knickknacks, and as Robert Kiyosaki would say, the doodads, staying strict and diligent for 10 years and continuously reinvesting, you now have $1.25 million cash if you actually sell up. You'd have more if you didn't sell up because you wouldn't have to pay the tax. And you're now making $267,000 each year in tax-free wealth. And we haven't even talked about cash flow. As I said at the start, the assumption here is that these properties are positive cash flow properties. So on top of that equity gain, you've actually got that positive cash flow as well. Now, I wouldn't suggest that you spend that. I would suggest that you add that as fuel to the fire and increase this momentum. Now, as I said at the start, that's working at 5% gain per annum. If the market actually performed normally over that time, your gains would be significantly better and your level of freedom would be significantly higher. Now, I said at the start, I would share with you at the end how you can supercharge these results. This is only possible if you're willing to put in a bit of extra time and build the skills and the expertise. But there is some very low-hanging fruit here for those that only want to put in a few extra hours each week. So let's start with one of the most simple ones, renovation. If you were to add instant value to that property by doing a small renovation on it, which could not only increase the rent, but also increase the value, instead of waiting 12 months or 24 months or 36 months to have it revalued and then go buy your next property, If you get good at doing those renovations and adding that value, you can buy the property, do a small renovation, have it revalued, and then refinance straight away to access that extra equity that you've created. You could either use that to speed up the process, or you could use it to lower your debt ratio, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. Renovation is by far the easiest, and you don't need a huge amount of skill to be able to do that. It's amazing the difference a lick of paint will do and a few touches inside. Even just updating the finishes and the fittings in a property can make a significant difference. And if you really do buy the ugliest property on the nicest street, just simply cleaning up the yard and cleaning up the house and improving the street appeal can make a huge difference in the value of the property. Another strategy is adding a granny flat. If you add a granny flat and rent that out, you've now increased the rent and therefore increased the value of the property. It's also a great way of turning properties that are negative cash flow into positive cash flow. Subdivision is another great option. Personally, this is my favorite. So buying a property that is on more land than it needs, subdividing, so cutting off that unused land and selling that as a vacant block of land. If you really want to, you could build on it as well. Not my recommendation, but you certainly can do it. But just sticking to that simple recipe of buying a house or a property that has more land than it needs, cutting off that land, selling off that land, and either paying down the debt on that property or using that cash to get yourself into yet another property. So you imagine if we can achieve $1.25 million over 10 years, just letting the market do its thing, well, if we speed up the process through this active style of investing, you can more than double the results. Another way of supercharging your results is to get investors involved. Instead of having to wait for your properties to go up in value to purchase your next property, you can get investors involved and you can pay them out later if you want to, or you can leave them in there the whole time, but using that to speed up the process. These are just a few ways of supercharging your results. I'll be covering many more ways in my other videos, but my main aim here is I'm hoping the light bulb has gone off for you to realize that you can become a millionaire in real estate and in a relatively short period of time. And possibly the most important thing about all of this is the skills and the education you get along the way. See, what you see as possible now is based on your history and the skills you have at the moment. After 2, 3, 4, 5 years of doing this, you will have built so many more skills, and the possibilities that you will see will be way beyond what you can currently imagine. So do yourself a favor and get started now. If you've got questions, please pop them in the comments. That'll give me ideas for future content. If you got value out of this and want to see more about this and more about the specifics and the how-to, then definitely subscribe and hit the notification so YouTube lets you know whenever I post a new video. And if you know of anyone that this will help, please share it with them. My name's Peter Bowman. Invest safely, and I'll see you soon.